So you've definitely heard this term thrown around, right? On the news, during company earnings calls, everywhere. EBITDA. It's one of the most common words in finance, but it's also, believe it or not, one of the most controversial. So what is it really telling us about a company's health? Let's decode.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle the big problem EBITDA tries to solve. Then, we're going to tear the acronym apart piece by piece. We'll walk through a real calculation, get into the wild story of adjusted EBITDA, and then we'll hear why some of the world's greatest investors absolutely hate it. You know, a huge challenge in finance is just trying to compare things. How can you tell which of two totally different companies is actually doing better in its day-to-day business? It's a real profit puzzle. That's exactly why metrics like EBITDA were invented, to try and compare their operational horsepower, stripping away all the other noise for a second. Okay, let's imagine a scenario. You've got Company A, an old factory. It's got old machinery that's all paid off, but it has a ton of debt. It reports a net income of $1.2 million. Then there's Company B, a shiny new tech firm. Brand new gear, very little debt, and it reports a net income of $800,000. So just looking at that bottom line, the net income, Company A looks like the clear winner, right? But is that the whole story? Not even close. Their debt levels, their tax situations, how old their assets are, it's all completely different. We need a way to standardize this comparison.
And that's where EBITDA enters the chat. It stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It was actually made famous way back in the 70s by a cable TV guy named John Malone. He needed a way to show investors how much cash his business was really generating from its operations, separate from all the heavy debt and big equipment purchases that were typical in his industry. To really get what's going on, we have to pull this acronym apart. We need to look at what we're taking out and, more importantly, why we're taking it out. Each letter stands for something specific that gets added back to the profit number. Let's dig in.
First up, we add back interest. Why on earth would we do that? Well, think about it. How much debt a company has is a financing choice. It's not an operational choice. By taking interest out of the equation, you can compare a company that's loaded with debt to one that's funded by investors' cash, and you can see who's better at the actual business part.
Next, we add back taxes. A company based in Ireland is going to have a wildly different tax bill than one in Japan or the US. Plus, companies have all sorts of clever tax strategies. By removing taxes, you get a much cleaner look at pre-tax performance, which makes comparing companies across the globe way more meaningful. Okay, now for depreciation. This one's a little tricky, but super important. When a company buys a huge, expensive machine, accountants don't let them count the whole cost in 1 year. Instead, they spread that cost out over the machine's useful life. But here's the key. This is a non-cash charge. No actual money leaves the bank each year for depreciation. So we add it back to get a number that's closer to the real cash the business is bringing in. And the last piece of the puzzle is amortization. This is going to be easy. It's the exact same idea as depreciation, but it's for stuff you can't touch, what they call intangible assets. Think patents, copyright, software, that kind of thing. It's also a non-cash expense, so just like depreciation, we add it back to get a clearer picture of the cash earnings. Okay, enough theory. How does this actually work in the real world? Well, the most popular way to figure out EBITDA is what's called the bottom-up method. You just start with a company's final profit number.
It's actually really simple. You grab the net income, that's the bottom line on the income statement, and then you just add back those 4 things we've been talking about: taxes, interest, depreciation, and amortization. That's it.
So let's look at an example with real numbers. Say a company has a net income of about $1.5 million. We see they paid $150,000 in taxes, so we add that back. They paid $100,000 in interest, add that back too. And they had a $200,000 charge for D&A, add it back. Boom. Their EBITDA is a nice, clean $2 million.
But the story is not over. See, EBITDA isn't an official government-approved accounting metric. It's what's called non-GAAP. And that means companies have some wiggle room, which brings us to EBITDA's very controversial cousin, adjusted EBITDA. So the whole idea behind adjusted EBITDA is to show you a normalized picture of the business. Companies argue they should remove one-time or unusual expenses to show you what their core profit would have been without those little hiccups. But as you can probably guess, this is where things can get creative.
So what kind of stuff gets adjusted away? Oh, you name it. A huge one-time legal settlement, the costs of shutting down a factory. Even something called stock-based compensation, which is a very real cost, often gets added back. Basically, management gets to decide what counts as non-recurring.
And just look at the difference this can make. A company starts with an EBITDA of $5 million. Then they say, oh, but let's add back that $500,000 legal settlement and that $300,000 asset write-down and $200,000 in stock compensation. All of a sudden, their adjusted EBITDA is $6 million. That's 20% higher. It definitely paints a much prettier picture.
Now, this freedom to adjust the numbers and just what EBITDA ignores in the first place has led to some really harsh criticism from some of the smartest people in the investing world.
You gotta love Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's legendary partner. He did not mince words. His point was that EBITDA is basically a made-up number designed to hide the real costs of doing business and make bad companies look good.
And this jab from Warren Buffett himself gets right to the heart of the problem. By adding back depreciation, EBITDA completely ignores the very real, very cash-intensive cost of maintaining and replacing your stuff. It's called capital expenditures, or CapEx. You know that factory's machines don't last forever? Replacing them costs real money, and EBITDA pretends that cost doesn't exist.
So, let's just sum up the main criticisms. First, it totally ignores CapEx, which is a huge cash drain. Second, it doesn't care about working capital, the money you need just to open the doors every day. Third, because it's non-GAAP, management can play games with it. And finally, for industries that need a lot of heavy equipment, like manufacturing or airlines, it can make them look way healthier than they are.
Which leaves us with the big question, right? After seeing what it's for and seeing all of its flaws, what's the verdict on EBITDA? Is it a useful tool for analysis, or is it just a trap waiting to catch people off guard?
The truth is, it's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used well or it can be used badly. It is fantastic for one very specific job, comparing the pure operational efficiency of different companies. But it is a terrible and frankly dangerous substitute for a company's actual cash flow or its overall financial health.
So, from now on, when you see a company proudly showing off its big EBITDA or adjusted EBITDA number, don't just nod along. Ask yourself, okay, what is this number hiding? How much are they really spending to stay in business? What are their actual cash needs? And what exactly did they adjust out to make that number look so good? Because that's where you'll find the real story.